Before we start, like all of the speakers, I just want to begin by saying that the program has been dedicated in loving memory of Daniella Nechama, Bad Rachel Shira. The neshama should have an aliyah, Gan Eden v'kedem, Amerachem al kubriyotav yachos v'yachmol v'yachem, Anefesh u'chon shema shel ha'isha, Daniella Nechama, Bad Rachel Shira, Ruach HaMetet nechina beGan Eden, hi v'chol b'not Yisrael shochavot imeh b'chlal rachamim v'selichot v'chein ratzon, v'nomar Amen. And as well, I am asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu that the words of Torah should be in the zechut and in the merit of two people who are like fathers to me. First of all, my own father, Yitzhak ben Sarah, and as well, the father of my dear brother, Ezra ben Rina. B'ezrat Hashem, they should be zocheh to a refuah shelema. There is a basketball player who is playing this year in the NBA, who embodies a distinct anomaly. His name, for those of you who follow the NBA, I can see you smiling in the back. You guys figured it out yet? Who am I talking about? Not LeBron James. I'm talking about Torrey Craig. Torrey Craig is not as well known as LeBron James. But Torrey Craig has something very specifically weird about him, and very specifically in this year. Torrey Craig plays for the Phoenix Suns, but no matter who wins on Tuesday night, or if they lose on Tuesday night, on Thursday night, no matter who wins, Torrey Craig gets a ring. He started the season playing for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he was traded from Milwaukee to Phoenix, playing his heart out to win. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Whether he wins or he loses, he gets a ring. And I'm a weird person. So when I see something like that in sports, in nature, in life, I think to myself, what is the human embodiment of this? Is it possible to bring a little Torrey Craig into our own life? To have and create situations which are literally win-win situations. To create dynamics in our interpersonal relationships where no matter what happens, we get a ring. And I think that perhaps a pathway towards growth in our life, in our relationships with others, in the way we choose to allocate our time, is to figure out not what would this guy do, what would that guy do, but what would Torrey Craig do? How could I create a situation here where no matter what happens, I win? So I want to talk a little bit about the destruction of the temple, and maybe look at it from an angle that I hope is beneficial to all of you today and those of you who are listening outside. The Gemara says in Gittin on page 55, Nun Hey, Akamtza ubar Kamtza Charov Yerushalayim. In the story of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza lies the destruction of all of Jerusalem. And what is the story of Kamtza and Bar Kamtza? I'm sure you've heard it ad nauseum, but I'd like to just review the little kind of details, just enough to be able to get to the point I'm trying to bring out here. There's a fellow who's got his best friend's name is Kamtza. His biggest enemy's name is Bar Kamtza. Talk about delicious divine irony. Okay? He sends out an invite. I don't know if it was on Greenvelope or Constant Contact. And somehow, as tech is always designed to do, the tech fails. And instead of Kamtza getting an invite to his party, who gets the invite? Bar Kamtza. Best friend didn't come to the wedding. Worst enemy? Front row. He comes in, and here's where I cut to the story in the Gemara. Ata, he comes, ashkeche, he sees his enemy who thinks that this guy finally wants to make peace with me. Tehavi yativ, he sees him sitting at his party. Amar le, he says to him, Michti, hold up. Hahu Gavra, you, this guy, Hahu Gavra is one of my favorite lines in this whole thing. He can't even say his name. Hahu Gavra means this man. Can't even call him by his name. Hahu Gavra, this man, Baldiva Avadahu Gavra. He's the enemy of a certain man. Right? He's talking in the third person for everybody. My bayitacha, what are you doing at my party? Kum puk, get out of my party. He throws him out publicly. Amar le. He says back to him, Ho'il v'atai, since I'm already here, look, you're right, it was a mistake. I'm here already. I'm sitting already. Like, I imagine that what he was saying to him is, since I'm here, Shavkan, let it be. V'yahiv, I'll pay you afterwards for the meal. Now, let's kind of get our heads around this conversation. He sees a guy he doesn't want, throws him out. The guy's like, I'm already here. Like, was that the problem? Like, if the person that you hate the most, someone who messed you over in business, someone who's spreading rumors and lies about you, he turns up at your 40th birthday party, and you're like, get out. I don't hate you. You're the worst. And the guy's like, well, I'm already here. That is not the point. The point was not transportation, right? Like, that is not the issue at hand. I don't like you. Read my lips. I don't like you. And then he says, oh, well, you know what? I'll pay for the meal. Again, not the point. The guy says, no deal. Amale lo. Amale responds, I'll give you half of the whole seudah. Amale pays for half of the wedding. Inshallah, you have a wedding soon? Expensive, right? People have weddings, expensive. I had a wedding recently. I did not know that there was that much money in the world. Okay? And what's amazing is things that you don't even imagine. They're like, oh yeah, we forgot we have to order the thing for the flour. Oh, how much is that? $9,000. There's a table thing. Oh, that can't be expensive. Wrong! Right? I'll pay for half the wedding. I kind of imagine that at my wedding, you might have seen, with an offer like that, you might have come to the dancing and seen Rouhani in the corner. I'm not going to lie. Okay? Amale lo. No. Amale yahivna lecha demeh kula seudatich. I'll pay for the whole thing. For the whole party. I don't know, I would have been up for a deal at this moment. The whole, including the music and how about the table thing? Because that's surprisingly expensive. Would you cover that? Yeah, I got the whole thing. No problem. I go to my wife. My wife is like, are you crazy? We hate them. They're the worst. Yeah, but maybe we could set up a separate room, convince him it's like the VIP room, right? And then when he gets it, he doesn't realize it'll be the bathroom. Like, come on, work with me here. The whole wedding he's paying for. Amale? No. Nakte biyadeh, says the Gemara. He picks him up with his hands. Ve'okmei, stands him up. Ve'afke, and he throws him out. This is the story. The man sees that no one else says anything. Amar, ho'il v'haviyatvi rabanan, since the rabbis were sitting there and they watched what happened, ve'lo machu beh, and they did not say anything against the fella, shmamina, obviously, kanichale, they also agree. They're like, okay with this. Ezul echul bahur kurza be'malka. Now, I don't know how your Aramaic is. How's your Aramaic, guys? Aramaic is good? No? Not so good? Okay. I'm just going to insert. I'm going to kind of play a little bit with the words here. I'm not going to translate verbatim. I'm going to translate kind of more, I'm going to take poetic license. He says, everybody agreed. Flags down a cab. Where you going? I'm going to the travel agency. Where you going to travel agency? I'd like to buy a ticket to Germany. Germany? Why? Where in Germany? Berlin, please. Very expensive tickets. No problem. I just saved a heck of a lot of money on a wedding that I almost paid for. Sign me up. He sits on the plane, goes to Berlin. They ask him where he wants to go. He goes to the house of Hitler. He says, Hitler, have I got a deal for you? Let's understand that that's what the Gemara is telling us. Ezel, again, now I'll translate it for you exactly. Echul ba'u kutza be'emalka. I'm going to go snitch on the Jews to the king of the Roman Empire. I mean, this is next level evil genius. He must have had a dog with no hair that he was stroking as he said that. To go get a king and tell him on the people, right? It's very strange. He's embarrassed. And what does he go do? I'm going to get the king of the Romans, most powerful person in the world, by the way, and I'm going to have him wage war against the Jewish nation. Why? Because I was thrown out of the Farhi wedding. What is that? So pretty bad guy, right? Pretty low. Would you call low life good term? What term would we use for this guy? Genocidal maniac? What would we say? Misunderstood liberal? What would we call him? What would we call this guy? We'd have some choice names for him. But I want to skip to the end of the Gemara, if that's okay. Because the Gemara interrupts over here, and it tells us something very interesting. If you turn 2 pages in the Gemara says, Tanya, Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar taught. I know you don't have seatbelts, but could you just imagine there was a seatbelt next to you? Just put the seatbelt on, because I want you to hear this with me now, okay? Amar Rabbi Elazar. Bo ure'eh, come and see. Kama gedola, how great is kocha shel busha, the power of humiliation. How would you end the Gemara right now, if it was up to you? Look at how great, Rabbi Elazar teaches, look at how great the power of humiliation is, because, someone? The man went to Hitler. He was willing to sell out his whole people. He was willing to destroy everything. I'll burn it all to the ground, right? That's what the Gemara should say, right? And that's not what the Gemara says. And this is the part of the Gemara that breaks my heart. Come, look, see, feel, understand how great is the power of humiliation. Sheharesiyeya Hakadosh Baruch Hu, because God, blessed be He, assisted at Bar Kamtza. He helped Bar Kamtza. V'hichriv et beto, and he burnt his own house to the ground. V'saraf et hechalo, and he destroyed his Bet HaMikdash. And the attendant murders and pain and galut that came out of all of this came from someone who got embarrassed at a party. Why is busha so potent? Why is it so toxic? I understand the human being going off the handle, but it seems like God is helping him. Why would God do that? Our rabbis tell us that the man then gets on a boat, and he's a man with a plan. He gets in the boat with a beautiful sheep. I don't know what a beautiful sheep looks like. It's just a sheep, but a sheep that is expensively beautiful. I don't know, it's fat, maybe the fur is white, I'm not sure, right? The best sheep. A sheep that Hevel would have wanted to sacrifice. Hevel had envy of that sheep. He gets the sheep on the boat, and in the middle of the night, when no one's looking, he takes out a tiny razor, and the Gemara says he makes a mum. Shada be muma, he put a blemish in the sheep. Beniv shivisifatayim, in the folds of the lip. Ve'amri la bedukin sheba'ayin, and some say in the folds of the eyelid of the sheep. Duchta, a place, dilididan, that according to the non-Jews, who also were sacrificing sacrifices to their pagan gods, that for them that would not be considered a mum, because you know what, you can't even see it, it's in the fold, you can't really see it. It's in the, when he opens his eye, everything looks great, fantastic. So what, when he's sleeping he doesn't look great? Fantastic. How do we look when we sleep? Not much better, okay? Lididhu lav mumahu. And he comes to the king and he says, the Jews have rebelled against you, you need to attack them. You need to attack them all. Look at what he's willing to throw away, and look at what God helps him do. The king says, how do I know? He says, I have a great idea. Offer to send them this sacrifice, this handy sheep that here's something I made earlier, right? Brings in the sheep. He says, you could send this, I'll bring it to the place. You'll see, if they sacrifice your korban, then you know they're with you. If not, then you know that they hate you, that they're against you, that they're rebelling, that you have to attack them. And the king says, okay. He brings the korban. It is actually a mum, according to us. The Gemara brings a machloket of what they should have done. But bottom line, they did not sacrifice this animal. And the result of that terrible thing causes the entire destruction of Beit HaMikdash. The galut, the murder, the death, the raping of the women, the starvation of the young children in the streets of Jerusalem that we read about in Echa. Everything happens from this story. It is not a mistake, my friends, that the mum that God helps him make is either beniv shebesefatayim, a blemish of the lips, of what we say and what we don't say, of how we can throw someone out in public and how we can be guests at that wedding and allow something like that to happen without opening our mouths. Or it is a mum, it is a blemish in the eye, because the people who saw the guy getting thrown out, you know what they said to themselves? This guy is a monster. He deserves to be thrown out. You know what? From the end of the story, you kind of see what kind of guy the guy was in the beginning of the story. And yet, for the worst lowlife on earth, Borei Olam has to choose a side. And whose side does he choose? Ha'Elohim yivakesh et hanirdaf. God chooses the chasee, never the chaser. You could be right, never the chaser. He could be the worst, never the chaser. That is the power of causing someone embarrassment. My friends, I want to tell you a story. A story of a young man whose name was Dan, or Dan probably. A young man whose father was the Ma'al Mehaber, the author of the Sefer Ya'arot Devash. This man, his father was the biggest rabbi in all of the country, in all of the land. And he used to see all illustrious guests coming to the house. And you know what? I don't know what happened, but something happened and the guy lost his connection to Judaism. He became someone that wasn't religious. Maybe he stopped keeping Shabbat. Maybe he took his kippah off. Maybe he grew long hair. I don't know what he did for back then that they thought he was off the derech. He was someone to write off. He was someone that his father all day, every day would pray for his return. And you know what? This young man, eventually, the prayers came through. Hashem heard his father's voice on high. And the kid, he made Tish'a BAb. And he rejoined the community. And he became an honored member of the community in which he lived. And one day, there was a big rabbi whose son was marrying a person in the community that this man lived in. Dan, this fellow, Dan, the son of the Ya'arot Devash, he hears that this great rabbi who he remembers from when he was a child used to come to his house. His son is marrying another rabbi from the town. Why don't I invite him to come to my house? So he invites him to come to his house. Do you remember? We used to come. You used to know me from when I'm a kid. Come, fadal, The guy comes. He attends. As he walks in, the rabbi, his son, the other consuegro, the in-laws, they all come to the house to show respect for whom? For the father of this guy. What they did not know is the awkward moment. The door opens, they're ready to say hello, they're ready to sit down and say, wagwan, and they see that there's a table full of food because Dan had invited them for lunch. And they thought they were being invited for hellos. You can imagine how quickly the answers came. They took one look at this man. They knew his past. They knew his history. They knew that he'd wandered. Oh, we just ate. Or, you? Oh, okay. How about you? No, we're just about to eat. What about you? Oh, I have IBS. I have IBS, by the way. IBS means nothing. Can we just illustrate this? IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. That's literally what it means. It means nothing. Are we in agreement on this? It's literally where you pay a gastroenterologist. You say, my stomach is hurting. And he says, I've done lots of tests, and I can conclusively say that you have irritable bowel syndrome. And I looked at the guy, and I was like, so I told you my stomach hurts, and you told me that I have a syndrome of hurting stomach. I was like, what is the medication for IBS? He goes, oh, we have no medication. I was like, why am I coming to you? Everyone had another excuse. And not a thing, not a morsel of food on Dan's table was touched. The busha. This is a man who knew the score. He knew what they were doing. He knew about the IBS and the eating before and the eating later and the shalom bayit. If I eat, my wife will kill me. He knew all the answers. He'd heard his father say them when he was young. So he didn't say anything. And the rabbi didn't eat, and the chatan didn't eat, and the rabbi-in-law didn't eat. I don't know if that's a thing. My friends, the humiliation of Dan did not go unnoticed in the heavens. And history tells us that within the year, the rabbi died, the rabbi-in-law died, and the chatan died. And I remember reading this story. And first of all, thinking to myself, how many times had I had to do that? But second of all, why were they saying no? It was for kosher. They knew that he had a checkered past. But our rabbis communicate to us that the feelings of busha, of embarrassment, of humiliation, they cut so deep that God closes his eyes to which side you're on. Closes his eyes if the guy is a lowlife, if you're right, if your intentions are pure. You figure out a way. Figure out a way for him not to be humiliated, not to remember that he once was less than. Because if you don't, that goes so deep that Borei Olam hears the innermost thoughts and feelings of a person, and there's nothing that goes deeper than busha. And I can prove it before the next time you embarrass someone. I want you to think of this. We say that Gan Eden, Gehinnom and Gan Eden, heaven and hell are not physical things, correct? So it would follow that the pleasures and the pain, the agony and the ecstasy of the world to come are not things felt with physical precepts and preceptors. You do not feel them with your senses. And yet, how do we describe hell in the Sefarim? Busha. You feel busha in your soul. It attacks you on your heart, in your physical. It attacks you in your spiritual. It makes you feel small. I'm a rabbi. I have a nice job. I have a nice organization. I have a lot of friends. I don't suffer self-confidence issues. But my friends, I am telling you the truth when I tell you that I still remember with pain being an 11th grade boy, 16 or 17 years old, and asking a question in yeshiva to my rabbi. And 3 friends from my year, when I asked the question, I saw an abbreviation in Hebrew, and I read the abbreviation one way, and the abbreviation actually said something else. And I asked the whole question based on the way I was understanding it. And the rabbi looked at me, and the 3 kids looked at me, and they started laughing. And before the rabbi had a chance to say anything, what these 3 kids say? That's not what it means, idiot. Can you blame a 16-year-old? Can you blame a 17-year-old? I'm 43 years old. I still remember it. It hurts. It wasn't intentional. I'm not a person who lacks self-confidence. But that is the power of busha, of embarrassing someone. You know, they tell a story about Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, that once there was a crowd of people around him, and all the people were coming and asking their biggest questions. What's the halacha? Someone is about to die and on Shabbat and you have to do this. What's the halacha if someone is to eat this and it's a problem? But they're all complicated questions. And then there was one person standing there. He also wanted to feel like he was part of the gang, but he didn't know anything. He was a beginner. So he said to the rabbi, he goes, what beracha do you make on an apple? Apple. Oh. He asked the chief rabbi what bracha you make on an apple. Mordechai Eliyahu, instantly, he saw the people laughing. he saw the sky. He saw the red rushing to his face. He said, that's a very complicated question, actually. It depends. Is the apple crushed or is it whole? Is the apple baked? Are you eating something with the apple? Because if you have the apple on top of a pie, it could be mezonot. If you have the apple crushed, it could actually be shakol. Is it like the juice of an apple? Because that's also shakol. How about if the case that, and he turned it into 16 different berachot. And I'm just imagining that guy's like, yeah, that's actually what I was asking right there. So, I meant all of those questions. My friends, I remember reading this story. And it hit me. And I remembered the story about the son of the Ya'arot Devash whose embarrassment caused. Lucky I don't get embarrassed easily. Whose embarrassment caused the death of 3 people. And then I chanced across the words of the Ya'arot Devash. The rabbi himself, whose son is the protagonist in our story. And I read it and I could almost read and feel as I was reading that his hands were shaking when he wrote this. Let me read it to you. Bebayit Sheni, in the second Bet HaMikdash, Haya Sinat Chinam, there was hatred that was unwarranted. V'lashon hara, and there was people who spoke badly about one another. Umizeh, and from this, lo shavu, we never did full teshuvah. Ba'avonotenu arabim, with the many sins of our people throughout the ages. Ve'ad hayom, until this day, machzikim betum'azu, we hold on to this impurity. L'sno chinam, to hate someone, or to not give someone what they need for nothing. Ki halo leheter yechashev. People think it's allowed, it's okay to say these things, to do these things, if your intentions are pure. And then he says, and this made me shake, V'lachen, and because of that, Lo nitkale kitzam, we have not had the Mashiach, and we're still in Galut, and he lived during one of the most difficult times with regards to pogroms in Europe. And this is what he says, and listen to these words, engrave them on your heart. Ki kol zeman shesiba hamevi'a lidecholi, because all of the time, as long as the sickness which causes a disease, Lo tasur, is not removed from the body, if you haven't gotten rid of the cancer. I'efshar lerapot hacholeh, you cannot cure the sick man. There is a cancer that grows in the greatest nation on earth. A people who on a fast day are coming out to study. A people who give so much tzedakah. A people who are capable of the greatest amounts of kindness. There's a cancer that hides inside of us. A willingness to look down on people. An ability to use our spirituality, the things that make us great, and to use those things to look down on someone else, to make them feel less than or unimportant. Oy. The Gemara in Shabbat says that there was a man whose name was Rabbi Zera, and he found Rabbi Yehuda, who was very famous for his unbelievable wisdom. You could ask him any question. And Rabbi Zera actually did. He asked him many, many funny questions. Look it up in the Gemara, page 77 in Shabbat. Lots of different weird and wild and wacky and wonderful questions. And one of the questions is he started asking him about the etymology of words. And he said to him, I don't understand, what does this word mean? What does this word mean? And one of the words he asked him, amongst the list is, he said, where does the word levusha come from? Levusha. In Hebrew, levusha means her clothes. And the rabbi said, there's a deep wisdom in Hebrew. Levusha, the clothes of a woman, the meaning of the word, the structure of the word comes from the word lo busha. Because if she can cover herself and not be embarrassed that she's not wearing anything, so the terminology of levusha is lo busha. I read this Gemara in Shabbat, and I started crying. Because I remember that every Friday night we say, Oz v'hadar levusha, with strength and with glory levusha. That is the clothing of the woman, the amazing woman, the matriarch in the Jewish religion. The mother, the grandmother that runs the family, that raises the children, that imbues the spirit of Judaism in generations. What is the secret strength of the Jewish mother? Levusha, lo busha. She cannot sanction and she cannot warrant anyone making fun of her kid. And if the husband says something too sharp, what does she say? Honey, it's too much. He can't handle it. He's not going to feel good. The strength of the woman is livusha. And the Gemara tells us in Shabbat, lo busha. Vatishak liyom acharon. Our rabbis say that a woman who does that, she will laugh until the final day. What is Yom Acharon? The Gemara tells us it refers to the coming of the Mashiach. You want Mashiach to come. You want to laugh with Mashiach, pose with Mashiach, do a TikTok with Mashiach. You want to laugh with Eliyahu and Avi. You want to learn with Moshe Rabbeinu. You want to be there. Oz ve'adar levusha. Live your life by the credo, I shall not embarrass. You know, a doctor, before he gets his scrubs, they make him swear. They make him take the Hippocratic Oath. And that oath requires a doctor to say, to promise, to affirm that they will do no harm. My friends, that is true on a physical level for a doctor, but it is true on an emotional level for every human being. Like the Pasuk says, Harofeh l'shivurei lev. God heals the brokenhearted. Have you never healed the heart of someone? Have you never picked someone up? Do no harm. There was a man, his name was Shmulik. Young guy, newly married, just came to America. He didn't know anybody. You know why? Because every person on earth that he knew was dead. He'd been sent from camp to camp, and right before he left Europe, he met a young woman, and they decided to rebuild together. They came to America with no children, with no money, with no connections. And they went to the city of an amazing man whose name is the Skvera Rebbe. He welcomed him in. This man got odd jobs around. He started pulling in a little money, but as he started to have children, it wasn't enough. So he got advice from some friends in the community, telling maybe, instead of being an employee, you need to have your own business. He tried to find something. It was a little difficult for a man who was new to the area with no connections. He finally found someone who was willing to allow him to open his own business, selling eggs. And he went from door to door, from store to store, going to ask everyone, can I sell you some eggs? Can I be your egg salesman? It wasn't going very well until one day, the phone rings and a woman says, hi, I'm calling on behalf of the rabbanit, of the rabbi's wife. The rabbi's wife does a lot of cooking. She hosts a lot of people who come to visit the rabbi. She would like to buy eggs. We heard that there's someone who's local. I don't know, maybe the Rebbitzin was into farm to table. I don't know. Good, perfect, let's go. You're the new egg guy for the rabbanit. You could imagine what happens after the rabbanit starts ordering eggs. Everyone says, oh, the rabbi buys from you? You must have like those special, the good eggs, like, the kosher eggs, the super kosher eggs. Da-da-da-da-da-da, super egg. Business took off. One day, Shmulik is walking down the street, and all of a sudden, a fella comes out of the shul and he says, at center. There's probably 2-3 people in this whole room that know what that means. Shimshon, could you help us out? At center means the number 10 in Jewish, in Yiddish. Okay? At center, we need a number 10. He goes into a Bet Midrash that he'd never prayed in because he lived on the other side of town. Whose Bet Midrash is it? The Bet Midrash of the rabbi. He never prayed there, he prays somewhere else usually. He sits down, they do mincha. As soon as mincha is over, he sits down to study for the few minutes between mincha and arbit. He gets a tap on the shoulder. The tap on the shoulder, he looks up, he sees this guy there standing right behind him, and he says, can I help you? And he says, yes. He says, would you like an egg? Now, I've been in shul, and I've been offered many things in shul. I've never been offered an egg. Anyway, you ever offered an egg? Never, right? The guy, he's like, what do you mean? He's like, no. He's like, actually, that's not like a euphemism. I didn't mean an egg, and it means like stocks. Like, would you like an egg? And he's like, no, I'm the egg man. I don't need. They call me Mr. Egg. And he hands him 2 hard-boiled eggs.
And Shmulik says, no, really, I don't need it. You keep it. He gives it back. The fella goes around and he sees he's giving everyone in the shul hard-boiled eggs to take home. As soon as they finish Arbit, Shmulik runs over to this young man. He says, thank you so much. I mean, that was a wonderful gift. I really appreciate it. You know, extremely nice of you. Right? He says, now I'm sure he had all the egg puns, but either way, he says, thank you so much. But why are you giving out eggs in shul? Is this like a new Hasidic minhag? Like, you go to a Hasidic shul in the morning, you'll see they give out whiskey and cookies, which is exactly the breakfast of champions. But, you know, that's a thing. But, like, eggs he'd never seen. Like, you know, he's like, is this a new minhag? Like, is this only the, you know, in the Skvera community? He says, no, it's not a minhag. He says, I actually don't know why. He says, but every week I get a phone call from the Rabbanit. And she tells me that she has many extra eggs. Because she orders eggs from someone who just moved into the neighborhood, who needed a help starting his business. But she has nothing to do with the eggs. Oz v'hadar levusha lo busha. The next pasuk, and what that will end, is the next pasuk I want to focus on is the Vatitenteref, vatakom be'od laila. She gets up in the middle of the night. Vatitenteref lebeta v'chok lenarotea. She gets up in the middle of the night, and what does she give her family? Teref lebeta. She gives them food. A good mom serve you a meal any time of day or night, right? Honey, you hungry? What do you want to eat? Your father's like, you should have eaten when we had dinner. Your mother's like, aw. How many times had I been told when I was growing up, if you're hungry, you'll eat this, right? But a mom, batakom be'od laila, vatiteteref lebeta, right? How many times did you feed them? How many times did you feed them? Right, in the middle of the night. Not too many times, right? My friends, I want to share with you an alternate understanding of that pasuk. It does not mean that they gave their children food at night. Vatakom be'od laila vatitenteref lebeta. She gave them food, she gave them nourishment. It means that whether or not she served them anything, if a mom gives a child a feeling that they don't mind being woken up at night for their needs, you need me if it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or 4 a.m., I'm here for you. That's the nourishment that a mom gives a child. Because when a child feels I'm worth getting up for, the child can do anything, even if it's only his mom that believes in him. Usually that's the only one that believes in you. But even if it's only your mom, the nourishment given to you makes you feel like you could do anything. There's someone who believes in me. But my friends, you wake up in the middle of the night, your kid wakes you up, you tell him, okay, fine. All right. You play the martyr. You're upset. The same letters that spell the word teref, which mean food or nourishment, spell the word taref. Something unkosher. Something torn apart. Tarof, toraf Yosef. I asked you a question in the beginning, how do we Tory Craig this life? All the time, we are faced with scenarios when there's something that we don't want to do. We're faced with scenarios where we're put in uncomfortable situations. If we live our life by that credo, I promise you this, you can never, ever lose. And no matter what happens in that interaction, you'll walk away with a ring. That's the win-win situation. You see this guy called Bar Kamsa comes to the party, and the guy comes up to him, he says, what are you doing here? And he says a lot of things, this guy, Bar Kamsa. He's like, well, I'm already here. Can I just stay? I'll pay for my meal. And the guy's like, no. And then he says something else. He's like, you know what? I'll pay for half the meal. I'll pay for the whole meal. He says a lot of things. He says a lot of impressive things, but he doesn't say the one thing he needed to say. I'm sorry. Whatever it was that made you so hurt, I'm sorry. So let me ask you, on Tisha B'Av, and don't lie, you're in a shul. Are you on team lo busha or team busha? How do you speak to your wife? to your children, to your friends? How do you speak to your coworkers, to your students, to someone on the street? Are you cognizant of the deep wounds that you can inflict by saying or not saying something? If we watched the dukin sheba'ayin, the eye that sees someone as a negative thing, then you know what happens after you watch your ayin, like in the order of the aleph bet? What comes after ayin? Peh. This morning I pulled up in my father's shul and someone was parked right in between two parking spots. And I thought to myself, what an animal. I checked, but I was sure Brooklyn plates. I was so mad. I pulled over and parked like next to him as close as I could, but I was halfway into from one parking spot to the next parking spot. I come out after the prayers and someone's trying to pull into the spot next to me and they're looking at my car, parked half in one spot, half in the other spot, and they're giving me the eyes, and the eyes say, what an animal. And I'm like, but no, the guy. And all of a sudden I realized that I went to the 8 o'clock minyan. And maybe that guy who came to the 7 o'clock minyan was parking there because someone who came to the 6 o'clock minyan was an animal. But the guy in the middle, he was totes kosher. Bedukin sheba'ayin. Sometimes the wounds are here. And when the wound is here, then the wound moves here. And then the wound moves to someone else here. And then God in heaven, who sees the broken hearts, comes down with a heavy hand. Not you, not me. None of us want to be there for that heavy hand. May Hashem bless us always. Oz v'hadar levusha.